Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
And welcome to today's meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California. I am Frank Price, International Relations Vice Chair and Vice President of the Northern California Peace Corps Association, and also a returned Peace Corps volunteer who served in Cote d'Ivoire, West Africa. I have a couple of housekeeping announcements before I introduce our guest, Glenn Blumhorst, President and CEO of the National Peace Corps Association. There are many valuable programs worth watching via live stream, and I encourage you to go to the commonwealthclub.org website to sign up. We would also be delighted if you would go to the commonwealthclub.org website to donate. Special thanks to all those who have already donated. We are the nation's oldest and largest public affairs forum as a nonprofit that generates revenue through events. You can imagine how much we appreciate your donation during these difficult times. To learn more about upcoming live stream programs, we invite you to check our website for a complete listing. It is my honor to introduce Glenn Blumhorst, President of National Peace Corps Association. Glenn, can you tell us about, first of all, your Peace Corps service?
Certainly, Frank. Well, first and foremost, it's just a pleasure to be here with you at the Commonwealth Club. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of today's program. A little bit about my Peace Corps service. I chose to join the Peace Corps out of college. I was from a family of service. My father, a Marine, my brother who served in the Army, my uncle who served in the Army, served in Vietnam actually, but I chose to join the Peace Corps out of a motivation of service to others. So national service was really important to our family, and to me, this was a way to serve my country, but also more importantly, to serve others. So I joined the Peace Corps and was stationed in Guatemala as a Peace Corps volunteer with my wife, Kathy. We served together, myself in an agricultural program, and she was in a health program. We served for 1 year on the east coast of Guatemala in the tropics, and then moved to the central highlands of Guatemala, a small indigenous village called San Miguel Chica in Baja Verapaz, in the center of Guatemala. So I worked with mostly rural producers, and most of them actually were women's groups that produced agricultural crops. And they were mostly women because this had been a part of the country where the Civil War had recently receded. And there were many widows and orphans following the disappearances and assassinations of many people as a result of the war. So it was a challenging time to gain the confidence of the community. Any outsider was met with a bit of skepticism, but we managed to settle in and build relationships. And we stayed for not just the full 2-year term of a Peace Corps assignment, but for a 3rd year and then a little bit more beyond that, working in this mountain village of San Miguel Chica.
Can you please tell us about your post-Peace Corps activities?
Certainly, Frank. Well, after Peace Corps service, we were met with an opportunity to serve continued service in Guatemala. And we worked for an additional 3.5 years with a small private organization in Guatemala. Basically, the things that I had learned in the Peace Corps allowed me to draw on that experience, and I started working in a pathway toward community development work. Following Peace Corps and 3 years additional to that in Guatemala, I then worked on major USAID funded community stabilization and development projects in a variety of different places around the world, like Afghanistan, Iraq, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, Colombia, East Timor, and that also included a 10-year stint, a residential stint in Bolivia, where I managed some community development projects as well. before heading to Washington, D.C. To work in a community stabilization and development practice area for ACDI VOCA. So really drew on my community development experience from the Peace Corps to prepare for my career after Peace Corps in community development.
What got you involved in the National Peace Corps Association?
Well, quite honestly, Frank, because I was living overseas most of the time after my Peace Corps service, I did not have much involvement in National Peace Corps service immediately after my Peace Corps service. And, that was a tremendous missed opportunity. I encourage anyone and everyone to become involved right after their Peace Corps service in the National Peace Corps Association. And I wish I'd been more involved earlier on. But fortunately, I had the opportunity after returning back to the United States to be called to this role as president of the National Peace Corps Association. And I came to the realization as I went through the interview process that National Peace Corps Association is at the center of a community of over 250,000 do-gooders or change makers, as we might say. And it is an organization that's uniquely positioned at the hub of that community to enable and empower the community to be such a tremendous force for good. So drawing on my community development experience, I felt that there was a great opportunity to achieve the greatest potential of NPCA, viewing it as an organization at the center of this community of 250,000 change makers. So that really drew me into the organization, and is why I chose to accept the role that I have here.
Well, you've certainly shared some important things. Now we need to kind of find out, what does the NPCA do?
Sure, Frank. We're doing a lot of different things, but to kind of focus in on what our mission is, we say our mission statement is to champion lifelong commitment to Peace Corps ideals. Those ideals can mean different things to different people. To me, they're about peace building, volunteerism, service to others, friendship, and social justice. So really, our mission is about engaging our community for a lifetime of service and championing that commitment to those ideals. We break our mission down into three goals. We refer to these often as strategic pillars of the work that we do. First and foremost is helping the Peace Corps be its best. And we do that through primarily our advocacy programs and ensuring that Peace Corps has funding for its programs, and then in many cases legislation that also helps bring about reforms and changes and improvements in the Peace Corps itself. So our goal, our commitment as a community here is to really help the Peace Corps be the best that it can be. Our second goal is related to our community, and that is to enable our 250,000 members plus to thrive, and our affiliate groups to thrive and to achieve their greatest potential as well. And then our third goal is really about the world that we can impact, and that is about amplifying our global social impact through continued service of our community.
Many people are not quite clear about this, but what is the relationship between the Peace Corps, which is a government agency, and the NPCA, a 501c3? Can you explain that, please?
Sure. Well, as a federal agency, the Peace Corps' core mission, if you will, is to deploy and then support volunteers during their service. And that's generally 2 years. Sometimes it can be more. And the Peace Corps obviously has an infrastructure and a process for doing the recruitment and placement and support to volunteers while they're in the field, and then returning them back from their assignments. But National Peace Corps Association, as an alumni network for the Peace Corps itself, engages those returned Peace Corps volunteers and even former staff and others who have that relationship with the Peace Corps in this lifetime of service here at home once we return. So we're really all about the domestic dividend of the Peace Corps, what we bring back home and what we do when we return. Whereas the Peace Corps is about the 2-year program generally that volunteers embark on and return from.
Thank you. How do you collaborate together?
Right. Well, we're separate entities, of course. We do want to and always have a collaborative and cooperative relationship. So we do. We collaborate in many ways. I think one of those is that returning Peace Corps volunteers and those of us who have returned from our service are the best spokespersons, if you will, for the Peace Corps. And so we informally in that way serve to help recruit the next generation of volunteers by telling our stories and sharing them in the schools and in the universities and other places, civic groups. We also, as an organization, provide services and support to return Peace Corps volunteers after their service. This is an area where Peace Corps as an agency and the National Peace Corps Association do kind of share responsibilities and the opportunity to support our community right after their service. Peace Corps primarily focusing on the immediately returned volunteers, and National Peace Corps Association focusing more on the longer term of the return volunteer life. So that's an area that we work together in. And then what is called the third goal of the Peace Corps, of course, bringing the world home, as we say, and helping create a better understanding of other countries and peoples on the part of Americans. This is really where Peace Corps and National Peace Corps Association come together on our missions. And that's really accomplished by empowering and engaging our community to share their stories and experiences with others here, which all contributes, we believe, to building bridges of friendship and understanding and toward that higher goal of world peace and friendship. That's how we collaborate. We say we advocate also, of course, and this is in kind of two ways, on behalf of the Peace Corps itself and on behalf of the volunteers themselves. Peace Corps, as a federal agency, cannot advocate for itself to Congress, of course. So that is one of our foremost responsibilities, is to advocate for Peace Corps' appropriations from Congress. Currently, it's at $410 billion per year. We are in the process of hopefully securing a $20 million increase for Peace Corps' appropriation for FY 2022. But one of the foremost ways that we can help Peace Corps be its best is to ensure that it has adequate funding for the future, particularly at a time like this with the volunteers, as you know, not in the field at the moment, and the need for continuous programming and infrastructure to eventually return volunteers to the field. And then there are other ways that we advocate, and this is more on behalf of volunteers and return volunteers, and that is we often advocate for legislation related to Peace Corps issues that provide statutory mandates for Peace Corps. In some ways, in some cases, these may be about safety and security of volunteers or other provisions, benefits and otherwise for them. So these are areas that we are advocating on behalf of the volunteers themselves for reforms, improvements in the Peace Corps, increased entitlements and benefits for them in order to make their experience more positive. And then ultimately, we see the primary stakeholders of the National Peace Corps Association being the future, current, and returned volunteers, always looking out for their best interest and working to ensure that the Peace Corps agency follows through on the commitments that it makes to them, in particular regarding safety and security of volunteers and the experience that they have as Peace Corps volunteers and returned Peace Corps volunteers. So that's why the close relationship that we have and the cordial and collaborative relationship that we have is very important, because we do meet generally on a regular basis with Peace Corps leadership, and we serve to channel the voice of the community, the returned Peace Corps volunteer community in particular, to the Peace Corps leadership in providing thoughts and guidance on the direction it should go.
Okay, what have you and NPCA done to make the Peace Corps a better, stronger, more responsive government agency?
Well, one of the things we do is, of course, as I mentioned, is really ensure that Peace Corps has funding. And this is related to not just being able to have the budget it needs to implement programs. We have undertaken a comprehensive review, if you will, of the Peace Corps over the last year as a part of a community-driven initiative to capture the inputs of our community. And that was channeled through a report that we provided to the Peace Corps and to members of Congress on improvements and reforms that the community would like to see, the Peace Corps community would like to see at the Peace Corps. And so really just providing that guidance and that input to the Peace Corps leadership is very important, and then accompanying that process to ensure that the recommendations are implemented And if necessary, and in some cases, and as we currently are right now, working on new legislation that we believe will incorporate many of these reforms and improvements, as well as the budget increase that we would like to see Peace Corps have over the next 5 years, because there is an abundance of applicants. Generally, this was pre-pandemic, of course, applying to the Peace Corps, an abundance of countries that are generally requesting Peace Corps volunteers. And the only reason that we're not able to give every person who wants to serve in the Peace Corps the opportunity is because of the budget. So working to help increase over time in a sustainable way the budget for the Peace Corps is a large part of our strategy. Helping it to be its best by ensuring sustained level and increasing funding over time, and helping it implement the reforms and improvements that the community would like to see are the most important ways that we can help it become better.
You talked about gathering information. Can you explain to us how you gathered the information to relate to the Peace Corps?
Certainly. After the evacuation last year, as you may know, we heard the community speaking on a variety of different issues related to the Peace Corps experience and their own experience, and issues that also evolved from the increased conversation on racial justice in our country, and addressing systemic racism. And this is one area that we felt it's important to capture the community voice. So we convened the Peace Corps community last year in a series of town halls, and then an ideas summit in the summer of 2020. We collected the collective inputs of our community, and we put that together in a report called Peace Corps Connect to the Future. And we used that report to channel the voice of the Peace Corps community to the Peace Corps agency leadership and to members of Congress, as well to ourselves, because there were many recommendations that were important for National Peace Corps Association and for the agency as well. Some of that has already been reflected in legislation that we have helped introduce, including, of course, the legislation called the Peace Corps Reauthorization Act, HR 1456, which includes many of the reforms and improvements that were recommended in the report. And it also includes recommended funding levels for the Peace Corps to increase over the next 5 years. Very grateful to Congressman John Garamendi from 3rd District of California, who introduced and co-sponsored with Representative Garrett Graves this piece of legislation. Congressman Garamendi, by the way, is now the sole returned Peace Corps volunteer serving on Capitol Hill in Congress. So we're very grateful for his leadership on this front and his vision to see the Peace Corps become a better, stronger organization, and to be able to sustain and increase its funding over the next few years.
It kind of leads to the next question. What have you done to make NPCA a better, stronger, and more responsive organization?
Well, I think the end result, or where we are now, is that we're a much more relevant and impactful organization probably than ever before. We have demonstrated leadership in this space related to our Peace Corps community. We have really become, I think, a valued partner to members of Congress as thought leaders and as advocates for the Peace Corps itself and for the future of the Peace Corps. We've stepped into this role driven by our own Peace Corps community. That's the way we work, and because our community has expressed these expectations, we have responded to them. And that's really what National Peace Corps Association has done over the last several years in particular. We were founded essentially 42 years ago now as essentially a passive traditional type alumni association, and we've transformed NPCA from that kind of alumni association identity to one now of a really vibrant community-driven social impact organization. So we refer to ourselves that way because we're fighting for the causes that our Peace Corps community cares about, whether that's the Peace Corps itself and its future, whether that's social justice issues, climate change, or whatever it may be. Essentially, the Peace Corps community, Frank, your mission is our mission, and that's how we've become, I think, a better, more responsive organization to our own community and to society. And we really, we measure our success by engagement and the ability to engage our community on these issues, whether it's advocacy for the Peace Corps or for other issues like climate change and social justice, whether it's building and strengthening our social action affiliate groups, which now number well over 185 groups around the country, or whether it's measured by philanthropic leadership of our community in supporting RPCVs, Return Peace Corps volunteers, and the National Peace Corps Association and their affiliate groups. So our community has dramatically increased its engagement over the last several years, and I think that's a sign of success.
Great. In what ways do you see the role, the focus, and the emphasis of Peace Corps volunteers in the future?
Well, I think in the post-pandemic world, which is a very different world that we're emerging in than it was when Peace Corps volunteers were last serving in the field, a lot of things are going to be changing, and Peace Corps is in the process of making the adjustments and the changes that need to be made to be able to retool and reprogram in this changed world that we live and work. I think undoubtedly we'll see volunteers engaged in global health issues, for example. I think also on the ground working on climate change resilience initiatives and in community economic development. Those are areas that the Peace Corps had forayed into and was starting to develop programs. But of course, in the environment that we're living now, I think those are going to be among the most highest priorities of the volunteer programs when they return to the field. I think, though, more importantly, Frank, and I think as we've seen even over the last several years, building bridges of cross-cultural understanding and friendship and bridging those divides, here at home and abroad are going to be really important. These are what we refer to as our goal 2 and goal 3 of the Peace Corps. Goal 2 being creating a better understanding of Americans on the part of the host countries that we serve in. Because we really are going to be the ambassadors for goodwill, if you will, in the countries that volunteers return to serve in. Building those bridges of understanding, helping build relationships from country to country, and really rebuilding the image of America and the strong relationships that we've had with many of our communities around the world. And then the goal 3 of the Peace Corps, bringing that experience from our Peace Corps back home and creating that better understanding on the part of Americans of other countries and cultures. I think it's clear that we need more of that here in the United States. We need more Return Peace Corps volunteers sharing the experience that we do abroad and coming home and helping create those bridges over the divides that may separate us here due to the lack of experience that many of us have had, that not all Americans have the opportunity to engage in. What I would underscore, though, more importantly, Frank, is that in re-engaging with the world, the volunteers that return to the field, it's imperative that we see ourselves as partners, not saviors, that volunteers also must represent the diversity of America as they return back. And that's incumbent on Peace Corps to ensure that the recruitment and placement and support to volunteers ensures that approach, as well as the retooling of the programs.
Before I jump back to the past, I need to ask you about the 60th anniversary of the founding of the Peace Corps. What will you do to commemorate or celebrate this event?
Well, it's essentially a year-long celebration, Frank. We've started last year already by recognizing the moment that President Kennedy in October last year on the steps of the University of Michigan challenged students to serve their country abroad. That was kind of the first inkling of the Peace Corps as he was elected and then swore into office. Of course, March 1st, 1961, by executive order, creating the Peace Corps. So back in March, we had a week-long celebration and a variety of activities, both at the agency as well as around our Peace Corps community to commemorate the signing of the executive order. And then, of course, in September, culminating, I think, the celebrations, we will recognize the signing of the Peace Corps Act, original Peace Corps Act in 1961 on September 22nd, as the kind of the end activity of the recognition of the Peace Corps 60th anniversary. So it's been a long-term celebration. Our affiliate groups around the country and others even around the world are celebrating in different ways the Peace Corps anniversary. We have a variety of activities that we've engaged in, of course, starting back in March, but coming up here in September. Peace Corps, I should say, first and foremost, is hosting an event on September 13th, in which they'll have their Loretta Milarupi speaker series. We're co-hosting with Constituency for Africa, the Ron Brown African Affairs Series Forum with Black RPCVs. We have our own affiliate group network annual meeting coming up in September on the 18th. We're going to have some advocacy activities. We're training probably going on the 22nd of September. There's going to be likely a wreath laying ceremony and a small ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery at the site of John F. Kennedy's grave. And then we have our big annual conference called Peace Corps Connect coming up September 23rd to 25th. That's going to be all virtual, of course, but a variety of different panels and presentations that we'll be sharing there with speakers and panelists and community content that's been developed by our community. So that will mostly take place during the evenings, but finally, Peace Corps is going to kind of wrap up, the agency will, with an event on September 29th, the John F. Kennedy Service Awards for returned Peace Corps volunteers in a ceremony there. So that will kind of bring it all, I think, to a close as we celebrate the 60th anniversary. But what we are looking forward to in ways that we can continue to raise the public profile of the Peace Corps and to celebrate the 60 years of this institution that has such an important place in America is we're going to be opening a new place called Peace Corps Place in Washington, D.C. And this will be a modest building where National Peace Corps Association will have our home, and we will have a gathering space there for returned Peace Corps volunteers and a resource center for returned Peace Corps volunteers and a space for returned volunteers and community members from around the neighborhood and around the city and around the country to engage and have meetings and conversations on social justice issues and otherwise, where we can really promote the Peace Corps in a visible and tangible way and show people what our mission is about and what that third goal means to them. It'll be essentially a manifestation of the third goal right there in that presence. And we're hoping to open Peace Corps Place in October and welcome a number of groups that have already planned to hopefully have their reunions and events there. And then looking ahead next year and beyond, we're also working jointly with Peace Corps Commemorative Foundation, one of our partners, to establish the Peace Corps Commemorative. And this is essentially a constructed work on National Park Service land in Washington, D.C., which will serve as a permanent marker for recognizing the Peace Corps. Amongst many war monuments and others there in Washington, D.C., this will be about the ideals of peace. And so we're hoping to be able to break ground on that maybe late 2022 or early 2023. So a lot of things in the works. So our celebration, if you will, Frank, is never ending, and we're constantly looking to increase the Peace Corps' visibility and the Peace Corps community's visibility in the public eye.
Addressing some questions. I know that you wrote, after the evacuation of volunteers, you wrote an opinion piece calling for volunteers to help in a time of crisis, but also recognizing they had skills and experience that this country needed. Can you give us a few examples of those skills, perhaps, and experience?
Certainly. Well, as the volunteers are brought home from the pandemic, I think in March of last year, it was really clear that, first of all, these volunteers abruptly ending their service with 2 or 3 days notice, really not the opportunity to say goodbye or end their service the way they wanted to. In many cases, returning, abruptly and prematurely before they had made plans for their return, or in some cases, they had more recently deployed to become Peace Corps volunteers. So really, it's a traumatic experience for them. For most of them, they were caught in a situation also where they didn't know what was next, what lies ahead for them, and without maybe academic plans or work plans or otherwise. We really needed to provide them support. But what we saw, of course, was a cohort of 7,000 individuals who have, really over the years of the Peace Corps shown that they are on the front lines of any global health crisis. You look at AIDS, HIV, malaria, Ebola around the world. Volunteers, Peace Corps volunteers have traditionally been on the front lines of those issues. These evacuees were returning home with technical skills, including healthcare skills, language skills, cultural skills. But more importantly, they brought with them their empathy, their compassion, their adaptability, and this ability to build trust with others. And inevitably, I think we knew we would see return Peace Corps volunteers that had been evacuated in the trenches working on the COVID response. And that's what we've seen over the last year or so is many of them doing contact tracing, helping in immunization drives, working in food banks and helping provide for food security, and even others working to conduct research and development of vaccines. So Return Peace Corps volunteers certainly have much to bring to this pandemic situation that we're in. And we really, in supporting them in the return, found it important to help guide them and direct them to those opportunities to continue their service here at home in the COVID response.
I have to just interject that the Northern California Peace Corps Association as well helped with finding jobs, housing, reassuring RPCVs or EPCVs that they were still, we wanted to support them the best way we can. And it was a challenge for us. And I think we met the challenge as well, but on a local level. I know that also that NPCA was involved in many efforts in 2020 to formally put many of the volunteers who were battling the pandemic. And that last year, Anthony Fauci welcomed the first cohort of the NPCA Emergency Response Network. Can you give us some details about that, please?
Certainly. Well, you're right. We were able to get Dr. Fauci to welcome a cohort of evacuated Peace Corps volunteers who had elected to join a program that we have called Emergency Response Network. This is a program that we've had for quite some time, but it was reactivated in response to the pandemic. And in many ways, what we were doing there was simply trying to channel evacuated and other returned Peace Corps volunteers toward opportunities to get engaged in contact tracing in particular, but in any way that they could to the COVID response. But in one case in particular with King County of Seattle, Washington, we found that there wasn't an existing mechanism for these returned volunteers to actually engage. So we created our own, and under the auspices of the Emergency Response Network, we fielded those volunteers ourselves by bringing them on board and placing them in King County, Washington to do that work. And they have transitioned from COVID contact tracing now more to call center support. And so Dr. Fauci was really pleased to see Return Peace Corps volunteers mobilizing for that impact as well. And through not only our emergency response network, but also through a variety of other partnerships and relationships that the Peace Corps has with other organizations, we saw return volunteers engaging in many different ways.
This spring, we saw the Peace Corps deploy volunteers domestically for only the second time in history as part of Peace Corps response. What's that involved?
Sure. Well, from the onset of this evacuation in March of last year, National Peace Corps Association, we lobbied both the Peace Corps Agency and Congress to give these evacuated Peace Corps volunteers the opportunity to engage back here at home domestically on the COVID response. We felt that was a very high need on the part of our country, as well as a well prepared supply, if you will, of return Peace Corps volunteers with the appropriate skills to be able to contribute to the COVID response. So some of that was actually built into legislation last year that was passed that really encouraged the Peace Corps Agency to take steps to ensure that those evacuated Peace Corps volunteers had those opportunities to engage domestically on COVID response. And So Peace Corps, through an agreement with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is FEMA, eventually was able to place those volunteers from a number of different countries. I think in total they were volunteers from around 52 countries that spoke a variety of different languages and had technical and cultural skills in the COVID-19 vaccination distribution and education efforts. And these in particular in underserved communities in 5 or 6 states across the United States. So in many ways also, they were not only just providing information and providing encouragement for the vaccination, but also just helping translate in many cases for communities that otherwise might not have access to that information in their language. And this is really a close correlation between their previous Peace Corps service abroad and what they're doing in this sense with FEMA here in the United States, and that is to really helping people learn to change their behaviors. So a small effort really on the part of volunteers to serve in that capacity, but with a big impact.
If I dig into the history of the response program, as I understand it, it actually has its origins in grassroots work by returned Peace Corps volunteers helping in a time of crisis, such as the aftermath of genocide in Rwanda. Can you please tell us about that?
Right. Years ago, Returned Peace Corps volunteers organized to continue service abroad in this way, and not just in Rwanda, but in several countries after that as well. This essentially helped coalesce and form what was called National Peace Corps Association's Emergency Response Network, established by returned volunteers themselves in the early 1990s. And of course, then this predates the Peace Corps Response Program, which was originally established as Crisis Corps at Peace Corps and were later renamed as the Peace Corps Response Program. So returned Peace Corps volunteers, RPCVs, continuing their service and responding to emergency situations and crisis situations goes way back. I think, since the time the first volunteers started returning home from their service, continued engagement around the world, whether it's in an informal capacity or through a sponsored network or sponsored program, they'll continue doing it in a variety of different ways that they can serve.
I must tell you, before when I came back from the Peace Corps, there was no National Peace Corps Association. And there was always something missing in my life after that. And so I'm really very grateful that you guys are around. So many of us have been working virtually, and I think a lot of people may not realize this, but many evacuated Peace Corps volunteers have continued volunteering virtually as well. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, well, Peace Corps has no volunteers in the field, physically actually doing work since March of last year. They have been innovative and creative in getting volunteers back to work with their communities abroad. And they recently launched what I think is the third phase of what they call the Virtual Service Pilot Program, VSP, and this is a program that's open not just to evacuated Peace Corps volunteers, but also to other returned Peace Corps volunteers, any of them who are prepared to spend 5 to 15 hours a week donating their services and engaging with the host country partner in their former service country. So this third phase that I believe they're on right now got returned Peace Corps volunteers connected with I think 25 participating host countries. The first 2 pilots which preceded this involved, I think, 20 different countries and well over 100 volunteers. And by engaging virtually the volunteers with their host countries, what Peace Corps has been able to do there is keep the Peace Corps spirit alive and engaged in those communities and really showing the commitment that the Peace Corps and the volunteers have to their host countries by continuing to serve, in this case, remotely. This is a type of collaboration and service that can be really impactful over the digital platforms and across time zones. I'll mention too that it's not just under this formal program that RPCVs are continuing to serve. For example, just last week I was in Minnesota. I'm in California right now, but last week in Minnesota I met a gentleman, Bill Hansen, who had been a community economic advisor in Uganda. Was evacuated in March, But since that time, well over a year now, he's continued to work with that host country counterpart that he was assigned to, called Friend of Mothers Initiative is what it was called. It's a cooperative, I believe, or producers association. And he told me that in the time since he has left and his continued advisement to them over internet and other ways, he has helped them continue to strengthen their organization and grow their membership from what it was at the time of around 20 members now, well up over 200 members, women of this cooperative. So again, the continued support well beyond their official Peace Corps service is what RPCVs are all about.
We actually have a member of our board who's helping a similar group in Peru. They were evacuated. I don't know exactly how much into their service, but since they've been back, they've been helping with the internet to support this group in Peru, and they've had a lot of success with it. I have a couple of questions. People have talked about the Advocacy Day on the Hill. Can you explain to our audience what that is?
Certainly. Well, National Peace Corps Association, as I said, one of our primary activities is advocacy on behalf of the Peace Corps and on behalf of Peace Corps volunteers. By advocacy, we mean, we're helping to make Peace Corps the best that it can be by ensuring that it has the full support of Congress for both its appropriations and for legislation that we believe is important to continue to improve the Peace Corps experience. So what advocacy means is meeting with our members of Congress to share with them the value of the Peace Corps and our own stories and our own experience and how we believe it made not only a difference in our own lives, but in our communities after our return from service and in the communities abroad that we served. So this is really about citizen engagement with our members of Congress. We have what we call grassroots advocacy efforts, and that means it's not just a few of us paid lobbyists or others in Washington, D.C. that are meeting with members of Congress and telling them about the Peace Corps. Rather, we rely on the broad and vast network of returned Peace Corps volunteers to advocate directly to their members of Congress. We do have an annual fly-in day, as we call it, which generally draws about 150 to 200 individuals in to Washington, D.C. That's generally held the first week in March on one day. And we provide all the materials and talking points and organization and coordination for citizen advocates from our community to come and advocate to their member of Congress and meet with members of Congress and their staff members in Washington, D.C. It's a day-long event. Usually a typical advocate will meet with anywhere from 3 to 5 or more of their members of Congress from their state and even other states or other districts. And then we ended up with a big reception that evening and just as a way to thank our community. What's also important though is the district level meetings that we have around the country, organized in part and in large part by the advocacy coordinators, which are a network of individuals around the country based and embedded in the affiliate groups that are present around our country. They organize district level meetings with members of Congress as well and their staff, and really getting constituents in front of members of Congress to speak about Peace Corps. First and foremost, to thank those who support the Peace Corps and let them know how much we appreciate their support of the Peace Corps. But also then those supporters, we really want to champion them to become champions of the Peace Corps. And anyone who may not be proactively supportive of the Peace Corps, to really convince them of the value of the Peace Corps. And some members of Congress need that encouragement and need to hear from their constituents to be able to advance those purposes. So we were very fortunate last year that our Hill Day in early March was one of the last Hill days of any organization on Capitol Hill. So when the pandemic hit and the evacuation occurred, members of Congress were really knew where to go for the Peace Corps, and they were calling us. The phone was ringing off the wall. A number of visits with members of Congress early on who were really keen on trying to support the Peace Corps volunteers that were being evacuated and the agency itself, and asking for our guidance and support on how they could help the Peace Corps. So we became a very valuable resource for members of Congress during that time.
Okay, for those who have never been in the Peace Corps, how would you recommend that they go about advocating without having necessarily those experiences, what would be the best way for them to let Congress know that the Peace Corps is appreciated?
Great. Well, I think, almost all of us, it seems, know a family member, a friend, or a colleague, or somebody who's been in the Peace Corps. And, so certainly sharing that experience or learning more from those individuals, asking them about their Peace Corps service and what it meant to them, and how it affected their life and career after the Peace Corps, and what they brought back home and what they did with that experience to create domestic dividend. I think, really, in many ways, we've heard individuals ask, is the Peace Corps still around? And so those are the individuals that we also need to create greater awareness of ourselves and the general public about the Peace Corps. One of the ways we do that is, working to get op-eds and letters to the editor and newspapers around the country, both so they're read by the public, and the public understands and appreciates the fact that the Peace Corps is still around, but also so that members of Congress see those articles and letters in their local newspapers and understand that they have a constituency that supports the Peace Corps. So anybody can write a letter to the editor about the Peace Corps. You don't have to be a returned Peace Corps volunteer. Anybody can advocate to their members of Congress on behalf of the Peace Corps if you believe in national service, and Peace Corps is a national service. And if you believe that international cooperation is important and building those bridges of international understanding, I believe it's a good motivator for advocating for the Peace Corps. Really, we do need to increase the visibility of the Peace Corps. I think in the public eye, we have a variety of other things that we're doing as well. We've helped a project with a producer, Alana De Joseph, produce a documentary about the Peace Corps entitled Towering Task, and we screen that documentary in different venues and events around the country, and then generally follow it by panel discussions related to the future of the Peace Corps and where Peace Corps is now. And again, like I said, the commemorative and Peace Corps Place, and there's an initiative for a museum of the Peace Corps experience. All of these initiatives are designed to really raise the profile of the Peace Corps in the public eye and ensure that we no longer ask, is the Peace Corps still around, but here's what it is doing around the world, and that the individuals will value the Peace Corps as a part of our national security programs and our national service programs.
Here's kind of an unusual question, but in lieu of the fact that many organizations, political organizations, have high school connections, some of the service organizations have their own high school connections. Is there any plan in the future to have an organization working with high schools affiliated with the NPCA?
Well, I think it's imperative, Frank, that all of us, one way or another, engage with high schools. I know that as I returned from my Peace Corps service, I think at least half a dozen times I've gone back to my high school in a small town of Missouri and shared my Peace Corps experience there. At the time of my service, I was the only Peace Corps volunteer from this small community of about 1,000 people. And a few years later, one of the individuals who had been at one of the events that I spoke at joined the Peace Corps. So now there are two of us from my hometown. And we've got a lot of work to do there, but there's a lot of communities where that's not the case. If you look at Plainview, Minnesota, where I was just a few days ago as well, there's a marker there, a historical marker in that community, that small community of around 1,200 people, showing that 4 of the very first Peace Corps volunteers came from Plainview, Minnesota, and then over time, I think a dozen or more have served from that community, which I think makes it probably the highest per capita in terms of number of volunteers from that community. So it's really important for us to all return at one point or another, or go into schools and share our experience in the Peace Corps. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the first time I heard and saw images from around the world and stories from around the world was when volunteers came to my school, my grade school, and spoke about their experience. We are designing a program at National Peace Corps Association that's in concept at the moment, but part of what has emerged from recommendations in our community, kind of a no school left behind approach, where we want to make sure that every school in every state of the country has at least one volunteer engaging in that school on an annual basis. And we're looking to try to get that up and going and funded so we can put volunteers in place that can coordinate those efforts from state to state, and then much like our advocacy network, ensure that we're making those engagements happen. So I really believe that in the formative years of grade school and middle school is where we really need to start talking about the Peace Corps. And that will produce, I think, the interest over the years and for the future generations of the Peace Corps that serve. Peace Corps does great, I think, on the campuses of the universities and in other organizations recruiting and networks for volunteers. But it's really, I think, imperative for us as a returned Peace Corps volunteer to tell our story in schools around the country.
Some people have talked about, I believe the Peace Corps requires a college degree. I'm not sure, but I think it still does. Some have asked, can the Peace Corps recruit new volunteers, perhaps who didn't go to a university, may have gone to a trade school, but can they recruit those kind of people?
Well, I believe Peace Corps is already looking at that as an option, and I believe that there probably is going to be a reassessment of any types of requirements that that do require degrees, because I believe there's a need to lower barriers for individuals who may not have that academic preparation to be able to join the Peace Corps and serve just as well as anyone else. We are encouraging Peace Corps to take actions that would reduce both the financial barriers as well as those types of barriers that might preclude individuals, particularly from underserved communities, being able to serve in the Peace Corps. So I'm not sure specifically on what, if any, measures are already being taken there, but we do believe it's important to look at kind of the traditional approach of applicants and those who serve, and certainly there's a greater emphasis now than ever before, probably on individuals over 50 serving in the Peace Corps, and that experience that they bring from their life and career prior to service is very valuable, but really representing, I think, the diverse makeup of our country in terms of different types of backgrounds and otherwise that can be brought into the Peace Corps is going to be very important.
Some want to know, is there a way for people who, let's say if you graduate from college, you're in 100% great health, you have all the physical skills that you would require, but as you get older, some of those skills and abilities lessen. Is the Peace Corps thinking of including people who may have issues with hearing or maybe wheelchair bound, things like that?
Well, I think Peace Corps generally strives to, like I said, reduce barriers to participation from anybody who would like to serve in the Peace Corps. And again, that's what represents America is a variety of different abilities and otherwise. And so I do believe Peace Corps in many cases takes on additional effort to ensure that they can accommodate individuals with special needs that would like to serve in the Peace Corps, and that includes deaf and hard of hearing. I know that they're about to hopefully launch a new program there. Peace Corps has traditionally had some programs for deaf and hard of hearing volunteers. So I think we'll continue to see those types of accommodations and programs develop for the future of the Peace Corps.
Interesting. I'm curious, just maybe because I'm in Berkeley, can you talk about maybe not where colleges rank in recruiting, but which schools seem to produce more recruits than other schools traditionally?
Yeah, Frank, I think you set us up there for mentioning Berkeley. So, I don't know the exact numbers, but I do know that UC Berkeley, of course, is one of the, if not the leading providers of Peace Corps volunteers. California, of course, in general, being the state, I think, that leads in a number of Peace Corps volunteers. I would also say, interestingly, University of Washington and Washington State, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, traditional places that produce a lot of Peace Corps volunteers. And I think what I think is more important, I guess I would say, and that is, let's see Peace Corps recruit from the historically Black colleges and universities, for example. Let's see those universities and institutions being at the forefront of the recruitment process and bringing those individuals from those universities into the Peace Corps. There's plenty of folks, I think, from Berkeley that would be recruitable to serve from all the great universities in California. But I'll just say, I'm from Missouri, and I attended the University of Missouri, and I understand that the Peace Corps has no longer a campus recruiter at the University of Missouri, and there's a decreased emphasis there, no longer a Peace Corps prep program at the University of Missouri. And really, quite honestly, those are the folks from the Midwest, like I was many years ago, that really are the ones that will gain from this experience of serving in the Peace Corps, and that we need to recruit actively and proactively. And Lincoln University and in Missouri, historically Black campus, I don't believe has ever had a campus recruiter. I'm not sure of that, but we really do need to ensure that those universities have access to recruiters, and that we're focusing on those campuses as the place that we'd like to recruit from.
I think you mentioned about Peace Corps Connect. Is it going to be taking place at Howard this year, or am I?
Well, Peace Corps Connect is virtual this year. We had planned to have it at Howard University in Washington, D.C., but due to the pandemic and the COVID situation, we had to suspend those plans. So there will be no in-person events at all to speak of during that week. Everything's going to be virtual. Very disappointed, because we do have a good, strong relationship with Howard University and wanted to build on that. So hopefully we'll be able to return there and continue working in some capacity post-pandemic.
I'm looking forward to it. I must say, the last Peace Corps Connect I went to, was great. I enjoyed it. I've been to two. They were the highlights of a year.
That's because
you guys do a great job. What?
That's because one of them is at Berkeley, right?
Oh, yes, it was actually. I'm intimately involved in that one, but I really enjoyed that, and I was looking forward to going to Howard this year. I'm going to ask the audience: are there any more questions before we close down? Are there any more questions? Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Glenn for sharing with us the inspiring and impactful work you do. I have a bias because I'm a member of the National Peace Corps Association, and I believe in what they do. I believe in the Peace Corps, and I believe in Northern California Peace Corps. But I want to thank you again. Is there any other question? Just to double check. Well, I guess I'm going to say thank you very much, Glenn. Glenn Blumhorst, President and CEO of the National Peace Corps Association. We also thank our audience for joining us today and watching the recording. And now this meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California, commemorating its 118th year of enlightened discussion, is adjourned.